Hi there, this is Solitude Ronan from Solitude Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. And today's random review is of Frank, directed by Lenny Abrahamson from 2014. This is the lovely lenticular plain archive edition, which I'll show you in a second. Abrahamson would then do the film Room the following year in 2015, Brie Larson, which won a ton of awards. This film is inspired by and dedicated to the comedian and musician Chris Sivey, who died in 2010, who was the vocalist for the Freshies, and also had the alter ego of Frank Sidebottom, who would wear a big fiberglass head. So it was written by John Ronson, and he was actually the keyboard player for Frank Sidebottom's band. And he also contributes lyrics with music by Stephen Rennicks. I mean, as soon as I watched the film, I ended up buying the soundtrack, because the soundtrack is wonderfully strange. So the film follows this aspiring musician, John, played by Gleeson, who walks about trying to get inspired, trying to think of lyrics for songs, then goes up to his bedroom and tries to write down music for them, even though some of them just come out as madness tunes. And then as he's walking about one day, somebody's trying to drown themselves in the sea, and it turns out it's the keyboard player for the band Sauron Piffabibs. The band's name is ridiculously obscure. It's Sauron, then PRFBS. Please try and pronounce it yourself. There's an amusing little bit in the extras where the actors try and pronounce the name of the band. And it's led by this mysterious figure called Frank, who wears a fiberglass head all the time. Coca-Cola, Lipstick Ringo, Dance All Night are future lyrics from Frank's most likeable song ever, which appears later in the film, which is hysterical. The other bandmates, a wonderful turn by Maggie Gyllenhaal as Clara, and then you have these two French bass player and drummer who don't speak a lot, and Dom, the first keyboard player, who's their kind of manager and producer. And then just because John says he plays keyboards, he's invited to fill in for the keyboard player who has to go to hospital and then gets sectioned, as we find out later in the film. So John has found his way somehow into a band, and it then becomes part road trip, part kind of examination of art and the price that has to be paid for staying true to yourself or being more commercial and quote unquote changing your sound and selling out. It's a really funny film, but it's one of those films that you're either going to probably love or hate. The comedy is not for everyone, the music's not for everyone, but then I kind of prefer films and music that aren't for everyone. So the music is kind of, it's experimental, There's kind of nods to Zappa and Captain Beefheart. Frank's kind of lyrical delivery, or like Car Seat Headrest or Daniel Johnson. There's not what you particularly call vocal singing. It's more kind of spoken word and using noises, and so as they go to this place that John thinks is just a gig, it turns out they're going to record somewhere out in the country to record their album. They end up being there for 9 months, so you have these kind of wonderful little vignettes of recording the album, trying to be inspired, the ridiculous lengths that Frank gets the other people to do to push themselves. I mean, it's really funny. There's just wonderful moments in it. The film contains the funniest sex scene this side of CB4. Gyllenhaal's fantastic because she kind of hates John from the get-go. Obviously Fassbender, Michael Fassbender it's a tough job to do because he pretty much wears the fiberglass head. But it's just absolutely fantastic. But as the film progresses, it turns a little bit darker. John, who starts the film with dreams of making it and being successful, he starts out as the protagonist, but then he slowly turns into the antagonist. You know, there's so many films about making it in the music business, and you know, people who go from nothing and then make it big, and there's, you know, they've made it as a rock star or a pop star or whatever. This film's not about that, in the same way that Bill Macy's Rudderless, which is a slightly different film, but that's not about kind of the celebration of making it big. This film is more about staying true to yourself and the price that's paid for changing your sound, trying to sell out, trying to be more popular, and how you essentially lose your soul to commerciality. Again, it's perhaps not new ground, but it's done in just such a beautiful way. It's a beautiful film, but it does take a fairly dark turn in the last third, and character arcs that you think will happen just because that's what most films do, this one doesn't take that route, which is another reason why I really like it. As regular viewers of this channel know, I'm not that big on modern films, as far as my knowledge and exposure to them, but I'm slowly kind of picking up really good films of the 21st century, and this is one of them. Again, this isn't a film that I would immediately have bought, but I just couldn't resist picking up this Plain Archive edition, which, as always with Plain Archive, is just wonderful. The booklet is part in Korean, part in English, and it's very colourful. Again, Plain Archive always do a good job, and that's just the case, the artwork. That's the disc, and again, it's got art cards in the little envelope, and as you can see, even the little sticker in the envelope is Frank's head, and you just get some art cards. So it's a beautiful package with Plain Archive, as they always do. Again, a film that I perhaps wouldn't have picked up apart from it's in Plain Archive. I mean, they even put things in the inside of the cover art, inside the box, which Not many companies do. It's also obviously about artists that wear masks, so it's not their persona. They can create an entirely different persona. I think there's actually a documentary about Frank Sidebottom that's recently come out, and also one about Chris Ivey. And again, the persona that you create while wearing a mask. Again, this isn't a biopic of Frank Sidebottom. This is more just inspired by John Ronson's experiences with Frank Sidebottom. When we find out the reasons why Frank wears a mask, again, the last third goes darker, but the last third is also quite moving. Like I said, as soon as I'd watched it, I pretty much ordered the soundtrack, which again is there are songs in it, but there's also wonderful little uses of sound. There's a really funny scene where Domhnall Gleeson cuts himself shaving, and then Maggie Gyllenhaal records it, and it's used in a song, and that's on the soundtrack. It's the soundtrack called Idiot Shriek. There's just so much pleasure to be had from the little details, especially if you have even the smallest amount of knowledge about experimental music. It's just so funny, and again, Domhnall Gleeson's character is leaking footage of the recording sessions on Twitter and YouTube, and he kind of convinces them, because their videos have had like 2,000 views, that they can be popular and they can be big, and he gets them booked on a festival in Texas, so they end up going to America for this festival because they've made it big, because 2,000 people have viewed their videos. I know all too well that I can dream of 2,000 views, but 2,000 views on YouTube is a drop in the ocean when lots of people have like 2 million views per video. So he builds this up as, oh yeah, everybody wants to see them and they're really popular, and of course they get there and nobody's heard of them and nobody's really interested, which freaks Frank out. So there are the tropes of music films and making it, breaking it and making, becoming a star, but then it kind of undercuts them and it goes in different directions. It's a wonderfully acted film. It's funny. The music, if you've got an open mind, is again really funny, but some of it's actually very well done. And again, as Domhnall Gleeson tries to convince them to change their sound, Frank comes up with his extremely likeable song, which is hysterical. But again, what price do you pay for changing your sound and not staying true to yourself? Which is also a question that we all ask on a daily basis. So that's Frank, which I will highly recommend. But again, some of you might not like it, and some of you, within 10 minutes I was pretty much on the wavelength of the film, and there's laugh out loud moments in it, but it's also quite moving in places, and it's just a really interesting little film on the nature of art and creativity and the price you pay if you want to be popular. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments below whether you've seen Frank and what you think of it, and hopefully we'll see you again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.